Hello, everyone. My name is Miranda Patterson, and I am the cultural attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Vienna. And it is my pleasure to be here with you all tonight. Thank you so much for standing by. I know we got started a few minutes late, but I hope we get some people joining us shortly for our very, very exciting talk tonight on U.S. race relations. I am very, very honored to be here and introduce Mr. Daryl Davis, activist, musician, author, actor, to speak to us all on this very relevant subject right now in the United States, as well as Miss Djamila, who you see here on the screen. She is the former director of the Human Rights Festival here in Vienna. Djamila Grandits, a very accomplished woman here, and she will be moderating. And I also want to thank Christa Bauer, who is not on the screen right now, but she is with the Mauthausen Komitee, and you'll hear from her later. She is the co-host, her and the Mauthausen Komitee with us tonight. So I also wanted to just flag for everyone who is viewing that this is the second in a series that we have at the U.S. Embassy right now. Earlier this month, we talked about the U.S. elections. Today, we're talking about U.S. race relations. And on November 30th, we'll have Mr. Peter Rao come and talk post-U.S. elections, doing a post-U.S. Election analysis, and what happens next. So stay tuned for that. But that's not the topic for tonight. I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Djamila to introduce our guest speaker again, as well as herself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miranda. As said, my name is Djamila Grandits. I'm a cultural worker and a curator based in Vienna, working on the intersection of arts, film, and activist political forms in all kinds of ways. And today I'm quite glad to have the honor to navigate and moderate with you through this quite exciting talk. But let's talk about me. As we have heard, Daryl Davis, US activist, author, Grammy Award-winning musician as well, is here to share an input with us to start off with. And then later on, we're going to have a discussion with our co-host, Christa Bauer, who is the Executive Managing Director of the Mauthausen Komitee in Austria, that is in a way upholding the memory of victims of the Nazi crimes, particularly those committed in Mauthausen, a former concentration camp and its sub-camps, as well as engaging in anti-racism and anti-discrimination work, particularly with young people and in education. And I want to encourage you to participate in the discussion through the chat function. We'll happily take your questions, comments, and so on, and involve them in what we are going to be talking about. But to start off with, I would like to ask Daryl Davis for a short input as departure for our talk.
Thank you so much. I'm really, really honored to be here. So I appreciate your having me. First and foremost, I do want to express my condolences for the attack that recently occurred there in Vienna. And also, I want to express how happy I am to speak to Vienna because I lived in Vienna for a short time in 1980. As a musician, I performed there at a place called Jazzland, the Ophir, and another club called Fatty's. And I also got to meet a lady with whom I had been in love with since I was a very young boy. I would see her on the big screen quite often. And it was the actress Cinta Berger, who is from Vienna. And so it really made my time there in Vienna to have met my idol. But anyway, here in the United States, we are facing a lot of racial disparity and upheaval and things like this, which has always gone on here in this country. But we're seeing it rise quite rapidly these days. And a lot of it comes from the changing of the landscape. You know, I deal a lot with neo-Nazis here in this country, Ku Klux Klan members, alt-right, and what they keep telling me is, Daryl, I don't want my grandchildren to be brown. They call it the browning of America, or white genocide through miscegenation, because they're seeing the almost completely white landscape now changing colors. And what they know, and is well predicted by the Census Bureau, is that by the year 2042, which is 22 years from now, this country, which was at one time a majority of white country, in 2042 will now become 50-50, 50% white and 50% non-white. By non-white, I mean Black, Asian, Hispanic, and anyone else. And while there are plenty of the majority here in this country who embrace that and say, hey, that's evolution. I welcome that. I don't have a problem with that. Whatever my grandkids become, I love them anyway. There is a certain contingency of this country that is not happy about it. And they are becoming unhinged. And we're seeing a popping up of all these different groups coming, saying, hey, come join us. We're going to take our country back. We're going to make America great again. We're going to build that wall. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And they are pandering to the fear of these people, of their landscape changing. As human beings, we're mostly creatures of habit. And when change occurs, sometimes there is civil unrest and upheaval until we can get over that. But that's what we're seeing. So people are going and running and joining these groups to take our country back. And what they mean by that is to white majority rule, etc. And of course, these people were awoken, if you will, when Barack Obama became president. That's when it started. And these groups began forming and popping up. And now in the current situation, they are starting to recruit heavily. So people go and join these groups. But then when the group does not succeed in taking our country back or making America great again in the way that they perceive it, they figure, you know what? If the Klan can't do it and the neo-Nazis can't do it, I will do it myself. And that's when they go off and they go out by themselves and they walk into a Black church and boom, 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 or into a synagogue and shoot people, or into a major department store called Walmart in El Paso, Texas, and shoot up Hispanic people. So whether it's Hispanic, Black, or Jewish people, these people who do this on their own, we call them here in this country lone wolves. And unfortunately, as we close in on 2042, we are going to see more and more lone wolves because they are becoming unhinged. And while we have agencies in this country, intelligence agencies, that can infiltrate a lot of these groups, they have operatives who look the part, fit the part. They can go in undercover, join these groups, gather intelligence, and foil some of these plots, such as we recently saw here in this country. There was a group that was going to kidnap one of our governors, the governor of the state of Michigan. And we had intelligence operatives already there who were able to gather that intelligence and avert that plot. So while we have operatives that can foil these plots by joining these groups and gathering intelligence, infiltration, it is impossible to infiltrate a lone wolf. A lone wolf is only one person. So how do you get inside one person? In fact, we saw a lone wolf just over a month ago, I guess it is now, where a young 17-year-old boy came from the state of Illinois with his gun and into the state of Wisconsin and shot 3 protesters, murdering 2 of them and leaving the other one with a wound in his arm. And then he went back home. This is a lone wolf. And these people are becoming unhinged because they know that window is closing on where they will no longer be in the seat of power. It will be distributed equally, 50-50. So this is why we're seeing, one of the major reasons why we're seeing an uptick in the rise racism in this country. I won't say that there are a lot more racists in our country, but what I will, because they've always been here, but what I will say is they are becoming more activated as that window closes in. So the solution to this is conversation, is dialogue. We can no longer avoid this topic, which has been taboo for so long. These things should have been addressed decades ago. But the topic of talking about race has been one of taboo for many, many years. And therefore it has not gotten solved. It has been swept under the carpet. It has been locked in the closet. And now it's coming back to haunt us. We saw that in Charlottesville, Virginia, 3 years ago. And we're beginning to see it now. So it is imperative that we have dialogue with people, with our fellow Americans who may have different opinions than we have ourselves. Many of these opinions are rooted in fear. And fear is the consequence of ignorance. We fear that of which we are ignorant, that which we don't know. And as a result, if that fear is left unaddressed, that fear will escalate to hatred because we hate those things that we fear. If we leave the hatred unaddressed, that hatred in turn will escalate to destruction. We want to destroy those things that we hate. Why? Because we fear them. They frighten us. But at the end of the day, we might discover that they were harmless and we were simply ignorant. So we saw the whole chain unfold 3 years ago in 2017, August 12th to be precise, in our city of Charlottesville, Virginia, here in the United States. On August 12th, 2017, there was a lot of ignorance in Charlottesville. That ignorance transformed into fear. On August 12th, there was a lot of fear in Charlottesville. There was also a lot of hatred in Charlottesville at this big white supremacist rally that was convened there. And what did the hate culminate in? It culminated in destruction. When at this white supremacist rally, a white supremacist got inside his vehicle and determined to murder as many counter-protesters as he could. He took his vehicle and drove full speed, full force into the crowd of counter-protesters. He succeeded in injuring 20 people and murdering one young lady named Heather Heyer. This is it. Ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds destruction. Now, one of the ways, there are many ways that we need to address this. Racism is a multifaceted issue in this country, and it needs to be addressed from all fronts, from the systemic to the institutionalized to the individual. When you deal systemically with it, it can be top down. You start at the top of the system and it trickles down, and then the people down below come into compliance. If the top is loose, you can expect the people down below to also be loose. It's like a department or a corporation. If management is loose, the subordinates are loose. When management tightens up, the people down below tighten up. They take their cues from the top. What I do is I deal with the individuals, because there are individuals who run the system. They're the ones behind the system. The system doesn't run itself. It's the people. So when you're dealing with individuals, you cannot use the top-down approach. That's where we have it wrong. We start at the top and go down. With individuals, it has to be bottom up. So I say, forget about the destruction. That is a symptom. Forget about the hatred. That too is a symptom. Let go of the fear. Don't spend your time and energy addressing that. That is a symptom. Go to the root cause. The root cause of all of that is the ignorance. If you cure the ignorance, then there's nothing to fear, because we only fear that of which we are ignorant. With nothing to fear, in turn, there's nothing to hate. With nothing to hate, there's nothing to become angry about and destroy. So cure the ignorance. The good thing is there is a cure for ignorance. That cure is called education and exposure. And the only way that you can impart that is through dialogue and conversation. A missed opportunity for dialogue is a missed opportunity for conflict resolution. And when two enemies or adversaries are talking, they're not fighting, they're talking. They may be disagreeing, but at least they are talking. It is when the conversation ceases that the ground becomes fertile for violence. So we want to keep the conversation going. We cannot say, I'm not going to sit down and talk with this terrorist. I'm not going to sit down and talk with this white supremacist. This is the stepping stone to the solution of resolving these problems. We need to find out, what is it they fear? What is it we fear? Where can we find common ground? And let's build upon that. When we, here in this country, when I've been doing this now, by 2021, it'll be 37 years. And what I have discovered is this: we start off this far apart as adversaries or enemies, whatever you want to call it. But through conversation, we find common ground, and the gap begins to narrow. And by the time you go from here to here, you have forged a relationship. We're adversaries, but now we're in a relationship. And we continue our conversation, and the gap becomes more narrow. So now we're heading towards friendliness, familiarity through all these commonalities, and we find we have less and less in contrast. And the trivial things that we have in contrast, such as skin color or how we our religion, begin to matter less and less. It matters less and less whether we go to a church, a synagogue, a mosque, or a temple. That's where we want to be. And that can only be accomplished through dialogue with those people that you oppose or perceive to oppose, because one's perspective is one's reality. And you cannot change somebody's reality. The best you can hope to do is to provide them with another perspective. And if they accept your perspective, they will change their reality, because their perspective is their reality. So you work on their perspective, not their reality. Only they can change that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daryl Davis, for this insightful input. I have a question directly connecting to one of the many things that you just shared. First of all, I'd maybe like you to share a bit more in detail what you mean by you're dealing with neo-Nazis, alt-right people, and Klan members on a daily basis, and how does this practice of dialogue look like? And then maybe also as a follow-up question, you mentioned the whole discourse around fear and the whole complex around fear. And what I wonder, isn't fear also fueled by a certain politics of fear that has been taking over in a practice of politics of emotions that we can perceive globally? And then the one question, if you practice this work of dialogue, that would really be curious to hear more about. How do you manage to balance, on the one hand, hearing other people's perspectives and realities without legitimizing their ideology and with acknowledging the violence that has an impact, obviously, on people who are affected by discrimination?
Yes. Okay. Great questions. Well, first of all, I do deal with this on a regular basis, on a daily basis with these people. And what I try to do is set up meetings with them where we can have a conversation. I don't frame it as a debate. Although, yes, we are going to debate certain points, because obviously there's a lot I disagree with in their assessment of our political climate. But I frame it as a conversation because, words are powerful. When you say, hey, I just want to have a conversation, I want to hear where you're coming from, I want to try to understand, how you feel, how you think, etc. But when you say, that kind of brings the temperature down. But when you say, hey, I want to debate you, okay, then people are geared up and they're ready to defend and offend, the kind of thing. So I frame it as a conversation. But, you use the word emotion. Very, very important. And let me say this. I have, my parents were in the Foreign Service. And as a child, I did a lot of traveling. Today, as an adult, I do a lot of traveling around the world as a musician. And when you combine my travels from childhood to adulthood, I've been in a total now of 57 different countries on 6 continents. And it's certainly not all the countries in the world, but it's quite a bit of them. And I've been exposed to a multitude of cultures, religions, ethnicities, colors of skin, practices, beliefs, etc. And all of that has shaped me from childhood through adulthood. And I can tell you something. No matter how far I travel from the United States, whether it's right next door to Canada or Mexico or halfway around the world, and no matter how different somebody may look or what language they speak that differs from my own English or what they practice, what they believe, when I return home, I conclude one thing. That one thing is that we all are human beings. And as such, we all want basically the same 5 things. We want to be loved. We want to be respected. We want to be heard. We want to be treated fairly. We want the same things for our family as anybody else wants for their family. And if we keep those things in mind, no matter where we go, who we run into, if we employ those core values, we will find it easier to navigate that society, whether it's, white supremacist society or anything else. So that's what I keep in mind, and that makes it easier for me to have these conversations and have a rapport where over time, many of the people that I deal with begin renouncing that ideology. And then they relinquish their robes and hoods and their Nazi flags and whatever else over to me. I'll give you an example of it because you used the word emotion. Very good. When a Klansman or whoever, white supremacist, walks into the room with me, their wall automatically goes up because I represent what they don't like. That is why they are in that group to begin with. So that wall goes up and they are ready to offend. They are ready to radiate hate and insult and vitriol. And that's fine by me, okay? I'm going to sit there. I'm going to listen to them. Why do you hate me? You don't even know me. All you see is this, the color of my skin. What's up? Well, Mr. Davis, Black people are prone to crime. There are more criminals in prison than and there are more Black people in prison than white people. So now that is their perspective. What the man is saying is true. There are more Blacks in prison in this country than white people. But it is a half-truth because he is not considering the imbalance in our judicial system that sometimes is predicated upon race, or the fact that there are plenty of poor white people also in prison, as well as poor Black people, for no other reason than they could not afford adequate legal representation. And perhaps they are innocent, but they took a plea to some lesser charge, and now there they sit. So he's not considering that, but his perspective is, oh, I see more Blacks there than whites, therefore Blacks are more prone to crime. All right, I'm listening, and he's sitting 2 feet in front of me. And then he goes on to say, Black people are inherently lazy, that Black people do not want to work. We want to scam the government welfare system, take advantage of all the free programs, et cetera. And then he goes on to say that Black people are born with a smaller brain than white people. So the larger the brain, the more capacity for intelligence, for IQ. So the smaller the brain, obviously, the lower the IQ. Now, he says this is evidenced by the fact that Black students, year after year, consistently score lower on the SATs, which stands for Scholastic Aptitude Tests, which we all take in high schools, that we score consistently lower year after year than white kids. Again, this is true. But he is not considering the fact that where do most Black kids in this country go to school? They go to school in the inner city. Where do most white kids go to school? They go to school in the suburbs. It is a fact. The inner city school system does not have the higher educational system that the suburb schools do. And I can assure you, Black kids who go to school in the suburbs score just as high, if not higher, than some white kids. And white kids who go to school in the inner city score just as low as those Black kids, and some even score lower. So it is not a question of skin color or the size of one's brain. It is a question of the quality of the educational system, which lacks more in the inner city than it does in the suburb. So here's what's happening in terms of emotion. Is what this man saying to me, is it offensive? Absolutely, it is offensive. Am I offended by it? Absolutely not. Why would I be offended by something that is untrue? This man does not know who I am. He just walked into my room 10 minutes ago and he sees my skin color and automatically he makes these assertions. So why should I be offended by a lie? I am not going to allow my emotions to get in front of me and cause this conversation to come crashing down. He is used to that because he is used to offending and pushing people's buttons. And usually when he says this kind of stuff, this vitriol to somebody who looks like me, or somebody who is Jewish, or somebody who is Muslim, or who is gay, or who is whatever he doesn't like, he pushes those buttons, they push back, either verbally, or it could even escalate to a physical confrontation. Because yes, it is very offensive. But we have to remind ourselves, this person does not know me. He is reflecting his perspectives. So we know ourselves. So let's hold our emotions back. Let him get it all out. Because when I do that, I am lowering his wall. He's never had that before. He's used to confrontation. He pushes, people push back. So I'm allowing him some of those 5 things I talked about. I'm showing him respect. I'm allowing him to be heard. And I'm treating him fairly. Now, let's understand something. You said, am I running the risk of legitimizing this person, this neo-Nazi or this Klansman? No, because I am not, be clear, I am not respecting what he has to say. I am respecting his right to say it. Big difference. So if I want to get my piece out, I must allow him to get his out. And I know this for a fact because over 37 years, people have relinquished their things to me, and I've asked them, what was the turning point? What made you do this? What made you stop and renounce this ideology? This is what happens. By my not going on the offense and pushing back and allowing him to have these things, that wall comes down. So if I want to plant a seed, I cannot plant a seed while the wall is up. The seed hits the wall and bounces back on my side. The wall must be down for the seed to go over into his ground. So as the wall comes down, because I'm not responding negatively to him, right? He exhausts all his vitriol. And now that he has been allowed to be respected and to be heard and be treated fairly, he feels compelled to reciprocate and now listen to me. Now it's my turn to speak. I could go on the offense and attack him and say, no, you are the criminal. You are the one hanging Black men from trees and bombing their churches and dragging them behind pickup trucks and doing all these things. And I would be absolutely 100% correct because the Klan has done that for over 150 years. All right? But if I were to go on the offense that way, what would happen? That wall would go right back up, his ears would plug up, and he would not hear a word I'm saying. I want to keep the wall down. So rather than go on the direct offense, I go on the defense. And my defense is such that it is an offense. It is a passive offense. I say, listen, I hear what you're saying. However, I am not a criminal. I do not have a criminal record. My parents do not have a criminal record, and I am Black. I have never been on welfare. My parents have never been on welfare. And as far as brain size goes, I've never measured the size of my brain, but I'm sure it's the same size as anybody else's. And my SAT scores got me into college. And I have a bachelor's degree. Both my parents had master's degrees. My father was working on his PhD before he passed away. Now, I'm saying all this knowing that this man had barely graduated from high school. But instead of throwing that in his face and causing the wall to go up, I speak about myself and my family. And he can see right in front of him, 2 feet away, I'm Black. So he's hearing what I'm saying. Therefore, the seed is crossing over that wall. Now, here's a crucial point. When he goes home, at the end of the day, he is reflecting upon what transpired during the day, just like we all do. And he thinks, gee, I had a 3-hour conversation with a Black man, and we didn't come to blows. That's never happened before. And what he said about such and such, it makes sense. Oh, but he's Black. But what he said was true. Oh, but he's Black. So they're having a cognitive dissonance. And that becomes their dilemma. He knows what I said is true, either because he already knows it or he has researched it. But he does not want to accept the fact that the truth came from a Black source. So that becomes a dilemma. So this goes on for a while, and then he has to, because he struggles with that, and he has to decide, do I disregard this guy's skin color and believe what he said to be true because I know it's true and change my course? Or do I consider his skin color and go on living a lie? Fortunately, in my case, many of the ones with whom I deal have changed. There are those who have not changed, and some of them will never change. There will always be those who will go on all sides, who will go to their grave being hateful, violent, and racist. But if somebody who is hateful, violent, and racist is willing to sit down and have a conversation with you, and you prepare that conversation properly and don't let your emotions get in front of you, there is an opportunity to plant that seed and close that gap.
Daryl, you're talking about fighting and dismantling preoccupation and false truths in a way. And what comes in there for me is also the link to this multifaceted and multiple approaches that you were talking about in the beginning, because obviously the way to dismantle wrong facts is to come in with also systematic facts, as you said. Why is the prison system as it is? What are the lacks and macros in the judicial structure in the US? And how does education and also demographic structures work? And how is that also a matter of power relations and systemic aspects of racism and discrimination? And when it comes to the multiple approaches, I would at this point very much like to involve Christa Bauer's perspective when we also talk about Austria, where this individual work is obviously one point, and we'll hear about it, what opportunities and infrastructures are missing when it comes to also the debriefing and the individual work of and with alt-right individuals and neo-Nazi individuals, but then also in a context where white supremacy has a very brutal history through the Shoah and the Holocaust, and then also has been backed up through political structures in place for a long, long time. What educational approaches are there, for example, for an institution like the Mauthausen Komitee, and I'd very much like to hear a few of the recent projects that Christa Bauer has been working on when it comes to educational measurements. So, Christa, I'll give you my space.
Thank you very much. First of all, I wanted to tell you, Mr. Davis, that we thank you very much for your work. It's very important. I watched yesterday a movie about your work, and I'm still very impressed also what you told us before.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. What our work is, we took over the legacy of the survivors of the concentration camp Mauthausen and its satellite camps, and that is the basement of all of our activities. So all of our activities are toward a never again. We do a lot of knowledge dissemination with young people, like anti-racism workshops or trainings in civil courage or guided tours where we inform them about the historical facts of places of former concentration camps, but also always connected with a link to the present. And very important projects, what we are doing since 2010 are projects against right-wing extremism, also racism and anti-Semitism. So in 2010, we published a book, for example, because we got a lot of calls from teachers or people who work with young people, but also officers or also from the police, where there were questions about, for example, in schools for CDs where they didn't know if this band is a right-wing extremist band or if this T-shirt has a symbol of the right-wing extremist scene. So we decided to publish a book where we inform about codes, symbols which are used in the right-wing extremist scene, where we inform about fashion which are used or which are just available on the internet and are directly right-wing extremist fashion, and also about right-wing movements and right-wing organizations in Austria, and also about legal facts which are necessary to know if you can report something and if it's something against the law. So we published this book, and we got a lot of feedback to it, and we updated this book just 4 years ago because the scene changed all the time. So we include the internet, also the new movements in the far right scene, which use the internet very often. So that's one part. And with this work, with the publishing with this book, we got a lot of reports of cases of racism, cases of anti-Semitism, right-wing extremist cases, and so we started a reporting field where the people can send us cases of racism and anti-Semitism and also right-wing extremism. And what we recognize is that in the last year, these numbers increase very much, and they are not only increasing, the cases are getting more violent. And there are 70% of these reported cases are in the internet. That's the state what we got on cases which are sent to us. So.
Yes, and I think, the book that you have published, I've not seen it, but that is exactly, what is needed. That is an educational tool to bring people, into reality of what's going on out there and how to recognize these things. I get threats through email all the time. People send me things and all this, and sometimes, there are certain things in there that I know, and they know I will recognize as to who they are. Neo-Nazis, they often use 2 8s, 8-8, because H is the 8th letter of the alphabet. So 8-8 stands for Heil Hitler and things like that. And you go down the street, you see some kid wearing a T-shirt that has 8-8 on it. Somebody else might think it's a football team number. I know what it is. that kind of thing. So yes, education is key to doing this. I have a friend who lives here near me, and she is the daughter of Jewish Holocaust survivors, and she belongs to a group. I can't think of the name of the group right now. I have it here, but she belongs to a group that is based in Berlin, and the group brings together the children of Nazis together with the children of Holocaust survivors. And it's very, very powerful and very, very successful. And that is another way of educating both sides and bringing some kind of reconciliation to these people because of the uprise in neo-Nazism, if you will, and anti-Semitism, racism, white supremacy, etc. Also, in Germany, the swastika is banned; you cannot use it, and so now these groups over there are using an American symbol, which is our rebel flag, our Confederate flag, because to them that represents white supremacy. So they're using that in place of their former symbols when they have their marches. But this is why it is so important for you to distribute these books and try to bring people together so that they can talk and learn about one another, because you can't learn anything about somebody if you don't know them. And it's hard to hate somebody when you're sitting there talking to them and you find some kind of commonality.
That's true. That's true, and that's also what the survivors did in past years when they talked to neo-Nazis. Maybe some were in prison. They went also to prisons and talked to the neo-Nazis. And what's happening now is that we get requests, where we do guided tours on places of satellite camps or in the memorial of Mauthausen with for neo-Nazis who got out of prison but had to do some programs. So we do with them the tours. We inform them about the history and also with the link to the present. But what we recognize is that these dialogues are very important. The information is very important, but it needs a lot of other measures to complete this. What we get in our office, sometimes we got calls of people who are in this neo-Nazi scene, and they wanted to get out of the scene, and then we try to help them. But we are connected with social workers, and we try to connect them with those social workers. But the problem is in Austria, and what we are requesting since more than 10 years is that there is an organization in Austria, like in Germany, there is an organization. It's called Exit, where neo-Nazis who want to leave the scene get professional help, and that's a main problem in Austria, that such an organization doesn't exist, because there is just like a short time slot to get these people out of the scene, because what we also recognize is that sometimes they change their mind, and if you don't get them at the right moment, they don't want to get out of the scene, or are scared, or have different reasons to don't do it then.
You are absolutely correct in that there is that short window. And another thing that has to be addressed, I'm very familiar with Exit Germany and Exit other things. Some of my some of my friends who are my friends now are former neo-Nazis, and they work for Exit Germany or the Simon Wiesenthal Center. And by the way, I had dinner one time with Simon Wiesenthal right there in Vienna back in 1980 something. But anyway, we also have to address the mental health issue, because a lot of these people come from dysfunction, whether it's in their family, whether it's in their environment, and they are looking for something that they are not getting in their home life, whether it's love, whether it's respect, whether it's whatever. And so, as human beings, we crave those things. And if we don't get it where we should get it, from our parents, from our siblings, from our teachers, from whatever, we look for it elsewhere. And that's how a lot of these groups recruit people, because they are vulnerable. They're not getting what they should be getting at home or wherever. And so we will give it to you. We will be your brothers. We have your back, and then they give them positions within the movement, commander and this, that, and the other. And they make them feel like they're somebody. And these are people who may not have ever subscribed to that ideology, but they're looking for respect. They're looking for love. They want to belong. And so these groups prey upon those people. And then here's what happens. When they are ready to leave, it is ultimately, crucially important that we support them when they're ready to leave, because when they announce that they're out or whatever, they're out there swinging in the wind, because their former friends or family who may not approve of neo-Nazism or white supremacy or whatever, they have disowned that person. And then they cannot go back to that group once you betray that group, because that group becomes your family. And now you have betrayed your family. So you're out there swinging in the wind. You can't go home. You can't go back. So they are vulnerable in this short window, and they want to go somewhere where they can belong. So they'll go to another cult or another type of group. So that's why it's important to have an anchor for them, to support them, to build their self-esteem, build their strength, let them know they can survive on their own, and then they can become strong. It's sort of like what we have here in this country, Alcoholics Anonymous, where they build you up until you're able to, be around other people who are drinking and you're not drinking.
I agree completely. I got the sign from Djamila to give her the word.
I'm actually claiming back the word, not for me to speak, but I'm trying to cluster some questions that came through the chat. And as we're limited in time, I'll try to make some connections in between them. And thank you very much, Christa, for your input and sharing also your protest that you go along with Mauthausen Komitee. And one question that came up in several forums is, whose role is it to educate? And is it the role of the community and of fellow Black people to educate white people and white supremacists? And what can we expect from officials, from institutions, and from government institutions? Could there, for example, be a Truth and Reconciliation Commission? And wouldn't it be maybe even better to focus on empowerment work within communities, on education, and on a systemic shift? And then there was a question also on education and the power of the individual education that you were going on about, versus on the other hand, the systemic system of white supremacy that is deeply rooted, obviously, also in the history of slavery, of colonization, of global capitalism, and how do we meet the individual approach and also the systemic approach that obviously goes more into the direction of redistribution of power and also working in connection to politics. But as we were talking also maybe about the impact of the outcome of the elections and also about what is needed when it comes to infrastructure. When we talk about the situation in Austria, for example, funding for a similar institution like Exit in Germany on the one hand, but then also a lot of measurements and a lot of initiatives that proactively tackle anti-discrimination and that allow a shift also in representation and in inclusion when it comes to powerful positions of speaking and of action. So that was a lot, but I think the core question is this co-relevance of the individual, of education. Whose role is it to educate? Where do you see the power? Then also there was a question on how did the community react to you reaching out to the other side in a way? And then on the other hand, how can we address official structures and what is needed to actually achieve change and to, on the one hand, allow people who are inflicted with this ideology to exit, and on the other hand, to implement an inclusive anti-racist society as a whole.
Okay, you asking me the question?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay. You know, I get asked that question quite often. You know, why should Black people educate white supremacists, or feel that is their job to educate someone who should already know how to treat people, or something like that? Let me answer it this way. It is time that we stop saying, I'm not my brother's keeper, and start saying, I am my brother's keeper. We all are Americans, regardless of what color we are. And if we have knowledge that someone else doesn't have, it should be incumbent upon us to share it with our fellow Americans, regardless of what color they are, what religion they are, or what their station in life may be. So we have been discriminated here in this country for 401 years. I first came here as a slave 401 years ago in 1619. And discrimination is still here because somebody has not been educated. So if my educating people who would seek to oppress me is going to reduce my oppression, you're darn right. It is my responsibility to educate them, and I will. And perhaps if more people would take that attitude, hey, let's educate one another. Let's stop this nonsense. If they don't know something, then and you're feeling oppressed, then teach them. Teach them. Make it your responsibility. It should not be your responsibility. People should know how to treat each other as human beings. But if they're not, then make it your responsibility. Don't be complicit in the way that they treat you by not letting them know, by not teaching them, or by reacting violently. Education is the key. And if they're not getting it from their sources, then share your resources and educate them and reduce your own oppression and educate them and lift them up. Because when you lift up other people, you will find yourself also being lifted up. And now, in terms of the systemic thing, as I said, the system did not create itself. People run the system. So what you have to do is you have to have people who are educated, that you have educated or whatever, and put them into the system. And then the systemic will change. Because the people who run the system, if they are of a certain mindset, that systemic is going to trickle down. So you find somebody that is of a different mindset and you put them into the system. This is why in this country, the United States, it is so crucial who sits on the Supreme Court. That's why there's always a fight. Nobody cares who sits on our little district court, you know, who judges traffic tickets or something like that. But it is very, very crucial who sits at the top of the law body in our country, the Supreme Court, because that is the system, that is systemic. Everything comes down from the Supreme Court and affects everything down below. Same thing with our presidency. Okay, we just had an election here, as you well know. Some people liked the current administration, while there were others who did not like the current administration. So what do? They vote in somebody who they like and put that person in to become the next administration, because then the system will change again from what it was. You know, that is a democracy here in this country. If you don't like something, vote it out. Vote somebody else in. So we see that in our election process. So that's why it's very important to educate and put people in the system that can affect the systemic.
With the new presidency also in place, and with also the outspoken agenda to address anti-racism from very different positions, what could one expect when it comes to, on the one hand, reconciliation work with white supremacist individuals, and then on the other hand, what measurements could actually trickle down and what measurements have to be implemented when it comes to anti-discrimination and anti-racism that could also be carried by the government?
Well, we can compel through legal means someone's behavior, but we cannot compel how they think. So, for example, back in the days when people like me would have to ride in the back of the bus because that was the law, and people who did not look like me did not want me sitting up front in the bus. So that was the law. If I did that, I get arrested, as was the case of Rosa Parks. The law changed, and it compelled people to allow people who look like me to sit in the front of the bus if we so chose. And you could not do anything about it. But it did not compel their attitudes to accept it. It compelled their behavior to allow it. Because if they did not allow it, then they would go to jail instead of Rosa Parks. So the system, the law, can compel behavior, but not compel feeling. And that's why it's important that it be addressed both legally and grassroots, on the ground, by people like you, by people like me, by coming to know one another. Because people are only going to be in these offices for 2 years or 4 years or whatever, and then they're gone. But we're going to be around a lot longer. The voters are going to be around a lot longer than the people in office. So we need to have our act together here on the ground. And that's why it's important that we come to know one another. And in terms of addressing individuals with white supremacy, I can tell you right now, there are some people that have come out of this movement as a result of becoming friends with me or becoming friends with other people that I know who do similar kinds of work. Had they not come out, they would have been lone wolves. Just think about this. Supposing somebody like me or somebody who's doing the kind of work that I do had the opportunity, perhaps, to talk with someone like Dylan Roof, the young man, white supremacist who walked into the Black church and shot everybody. 9 Black people who were just there doing Bible study. Perhaps those 9 people would still be alive. If some individual had perhaps spoken to the gunman over there in Vienna prior to this, maybe had a conversation, just turned on a little light bulb, perhaps some people would still be alive. I'm not saying they would. I'm just saying that is a possibility. In my case, I know it's a probability because I've been doing it for 37 years. I would not still be doing it if it wasn't working.
Thank you, Daryl. I'd very much like to draw back the line to the Austrian context one more time. And you already wanted, Christa, will be back in the picture in a second. You already elaborated on the fact that there's certainly infrastructure for exit mechanisms, for example, missing. But what else is needed when it comes to measurements of anti-discrimination and anti-racism, also from institutional structures that could support your educational work even more than it does already when we talk about the multifaceted approaches to moving towards an anti-racist society?
So on the one hand, from the government or other fund stations, I tell it like that, the NGOs who are working against racism, right-wing extremism, or anti-Semitism need financial support, and there is some support, but it's not enough. So it would be more effective if this support would be bigger and there would be more financial support on the one hand, and on the other hand, it would be necessary that there is more communication between the government and NGOs, also the police, so that there are more meetings or roundtables in any way, that there is more exchange, that the NGOs, the civil society is included in programs or in new strategies from the government, that they can also talk about their experience and influence with their experience. And I think for one, you mentioned Rosa Parks, and I think that's one important example, because to prevent something, or to work towards a never again, to work against racism and anti-Semitism, I think prevention work is very important. On the one hand, to talk to the people, to inform them about facts, but also to encourage them to show civil courage, like Rosa Parks with this huge effect. Is what we use Rosa Parks, for example, in our civil courage trainings we tell the story of Rosa Parks to the young people, to tell them if they show civil courage and not look away and help when there is discrimination in any way, it can have huge effects. And I think these examples are very important to transport to the people, that to motivate them not to look the other way and go home and do it the easy way, instead of looking and showing civil courage. So I think that that was also one thing which when in 1938 or in the years before, when the people would have shown more civil courage, maybe something would have changed. If they wouldn't have watched when Jews were discriminated in the years before Nazis got to power, maybe something would have changed. And these are some lessons what we try to educate in our work, especially with young people.
Yeah, we have a saying which says exactly what you just said. He who walks in silence hangs the innocent and lets the guilty go free.
Good saying.
Christa, thank you very much for your input once more. So we are coming towards an end. Thank you very much to the two of you to sharing insights into your work, into your practice, into year-long experience. Obviously, it is a very complex, very multifaceted topic. I think we could go on discussing hours and hours only about the aspect of education and all the different systematic and individual approaches on that. But I'd still like to summarize that there's always multiple approaches needed at once, and there's alliances in between the single approaches needed. There's community work that goes into healing and empowering. That's as important as reaching out to people who actually are willing to leave this violent ideology. And thank you for what you are doing, the two of you. And I think there are so many more things that one can think and discuss about arts and culture. For an example, different approaches of mediation, media, films. As we heard, there is a film about you, Daryl Davis. Feel free to look it up and delve deeper into this story, into the story, into your practice. And yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for engaging with your questions. Sorry in case we did not have the time to cover all the aspects. We're limited in time, unfortunately. So thank you very much for being online with us in these very special circumstances. And I will wish you a lovely evening. Thank you, Daryl. Thank you, Christa.
Well, I want to say thank you as well. Thank you, Christa, very, very much. I really enjoy your point of view. And thank you for moderating this thing, Djamila. I appreciate that as well, and to the State Department for having me. And the musician in me wants to share with you all there in Austria, one of the finest musicians that is there in Austria. I had the great pleasure of playing with. Please go out and see him. His name is Al Cook, and he lives there in Vienna. A wonderful musician, And for those of you who know Senta Berger, tell her I am still her biggest fan.
Let Santa know. Thank you very much. Have a pleasant evening. Bye, Daryl.
Bye-bye.
You, bye-bye.
Bye, Christa. Bye.